Welcome to the best ever PC benchmark channel. Today we're diving into a comprehensive performance analysis of Marvel Rivals using the powerhouse combination of the AMD Ryzen 7 9800 X3D and NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3090. Everything is running stock, no overclocking here, and we're capturing all the data using CapFrameX and Riva Tuner. Quick heads up, over 96% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's flip that. Our goal is to hit 1,000 subscribers, so if you appreciate in-depth, no-nonsense benchmarking, smash that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts or questions, and don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's jump into the benchmarks. At 1080p, Marvel Rivals runs incredibly well on the RTX 3090, even with all post-processing and eye candy maxed out. Let's break it down across three presets: Ultra, Medium, and Low. Ultra settings. With every slider cranked to the max, the RTX 3090 averages around 80 FPS. Character models are razor sharp, effects like explosions and particle systems are full quality, and map geometry remains richly detailed. The game feels polished and immersive, perfect for players who want to soak in the visuals without sacrificing smoothness. There are occasional dips in chaotic teamfights, but nothing that disrupts gameplay. If you're on a 100Hz plus display, this setting offers both spectacle and stability. Medium settings. Switching to medium settings bumps us up to 140 FPS on average. Textures are still clean, lighting remains natural, and all key effects are intact. But you'll notice less ambient detail and a simpler lighting pass. This is the sweet spot for most players. It strikes a great balance between fast input response and solid visual fidelity. During skirmishes and multi-character ultimates, frame delivery stays even, which is critical for precision-based heroes. You lose very little visually, but gain a lot in responsiveness. Low settings. Drop it all the way down to low, and the RTX 3090 flies, pushing 170 FPS consistently. This is where competitive players thrive. Minimal input latency, max frame delivery. You'll see more aliasing, flatter lighting, and reduced environmental detail, but gameplay is ultra fluid. Perfect for ranked play or anyone chasing every possible advantage. The game still looks decent, but what you gain in performance is what matters most here. In short, the RTX 3090 doesn't just run Marvel Rivals, it dominates it at 1080p, no upscaling needed. Now let's shift to 1440p, where GPU demand increases, but the RTX 3090 still puts up a serious fight. This is where that 24GB of VRAM and raw muscle start to shine. We tested the game at Ultra, Medium, and Low presets, again with no upscalers or frame generation. Ultra settings. At native 1440p Ultra, the RTX 3090 averages around 70 FPS. The visuals are excellent. Crisp edges, high-quality shadows, and rich lighting effects that really make Marvel Rivals pop. Even in large team battles with explosions and particle-heavy abilities, the card holds firm with only minor frame drops. It's a visually stunning experience and perfect for those playing on a 75Hz or 80Hz monitor. However, competitive players might notice the drop in frame ceiling compared to 1080p. Still, for single-player modes or casual matches, this setting brings out the game's full visual potential. Medium settings. Drop it to medium and you'll hit a buttery smooth 120 FPS average. Visual clarity stays strong with detailed textures and smooth animation. You'll notice some reduction in ambient effects and background complexity, but the core aesthetic is still intact. This is the go-to preset for players who want strong visuals and consistent responsiveness. Whether you're solo pushing lanes or diving into tight-knit teamfights, the experience feels stable and fluid. Great for 120Hz displays, giving you just enough headroom for high refresh gaming without heavy compromises. Low settings. On low, the 3090 climbs to 130 FPS average. Snappy, clean, and focused entirely on gameplay fluidity. All non-essential visual bells and whistles are stripped away, leaving you with high visibility and zero distractions. Environmental clutter is reduced, post-processing is minimal, and character readability improves, perfect for players prioritizing reaction time. It's not the most beautiful version of Marvel Rivals, but it's the one that gives you the edge when every millisecond matters. For high-stakes PvP, this is the setting where the 3090 truly feels untouchable. So at 1440p, the RTX 3090 is still more than capable, whether you're chasing wins or admiring the view. Marvel Rivals supports a full lineup of modern upscaling technologies, and at 1080p Ultra, each one gives us a solid performance boost while preserving the game's visual identity. I tested DLSS FSR3 XESS, TSR, and TAAU with everything else maxed out. Let's break it down one by one. DLSS. DLSS quality mode delivers the cleanest result across the board. Even in chaotic teamfights, explosions, particle trails, ultimates going off, it maintains high clarity without breaking down. Edges are razor sharp, vegetation looks real, and fast panning shots don't introduce noticeable blur or artifacts. You're looking at around 90 FPS average, with tight frame pacing and excellent 1% lows that rarely dip below 110. This is the best option if you want the sharpest image while keeping the motion smooth for both casual and competitive play. Animations stay fluid, and input latency remains minimal, even in sniper duels or close quarters brawls. If you're on a G-Sync or high refresh panel, DLSS lets you fully use it without sacrificing fidelity. FSR3, frame gen off. Now let's talk about raw performance, because FSR3 comes out swinging. At 100 FPS average, it gives you the highest frame rate of the bunch, and that's without frame generation turned on. Image clarity is strong, though you might notice slightly softer edges compared to DLSS, especially on dynamic effects or distant outlines. But it's more than playable, even visually impressive, particularly if you're coming from older upscaling solutions. Where FSR3 shines is responsiveness. Movement is snappy, abilities land with zero delay, and dodging mid-fight feels natural. It's perfect for PvP-focused players who care more about responsiveness than tiny details. This is AMD's best version of FSR to date, and it shows. XESS. XESS surprises here with its solid balance. On average, we're hitting 90 FPS, and the visual output stays competitive, clean enough to satisfy players coming from DLSS. It doesn't have DLSS level reconstruction in motion, but it handles edges and lighting well. Where you may see a bit of softness is in transparent effects, like smoke trails or ambient light cones, but it holds up admirably. For an Intel-developed solution running on an NVIDIA card, XESS is doing serious work. If you're looking for a consistent and platform-agnostic alternative, this delivers. TSR, Temporal Super Resolution, is Epic's in-house tech, and it performs right in line with XESS here. You'll see around 90 FPS average, and the visual output looks great, especially for a title built in Unreal Engine. Fine detail like hair strands and clothing textures are preserved well, though there's occasional ghosting if you spin the camera quickly. In teamfights or mobility-heavy matches, it still holds frame pacing tightly, and never feels like it's falling apart. Great if you're on an AMD or Intel GPU, or if you're playing in an environment where DLSS isn't available. Solid, clean, and dependable across various hardware. TAAU. Last on the list is TAAU, and while it doesn't push FPS quite as high, it still maintains a healthy 80 average. The game remains smooth, but visually, this is where you'll start to see softness in finer areas, especially in distance geometry and thin object outlines. Post-processing stays strong, but the lack of advanced reconstruction is apparent if you pause and compare it to DLSS or FSR3. That said, it's consistent, reliable, and offers a familiar visual tone for those used to standard TA-based upscaling. If you don't care about edge-perfect sharpness and just want stable performance, TAAU still gets the job done. Now we're stepping things up. At 1440p, Ultra, the RTX 3090 has more pixels to push, but with upscalers enabled, it holds strong. Let's break down how each solution performs. DLSS, FSR3, TSR, XESS, and TAAU. All tested without frame generation. DLSS. DLSS maintains its lead in visual clarity at 1440p, with an average of 80 frames per second. It renders the world with excellent sharpness. Character edges, foliage, shadows, everything looks precise. Combat remains fluid, and 1% lows are well managed. Even during intense team fights or on large open maps, DLSS holds firm. There's no ghosting or artifacting to speak of, and camera movement feels smooth. This is the ideal choice if you want great visuals and performance on a high refresh 1440p display. FSR3, frame gen off. FSR3 hits the highest frame rate in this group. At 90 FPS average, it's snappy, responsive, and surprisingly crisp for an open standard solution. There's some softness if you're pixel peeping, but in actual gameplay, it's barely noticeable. What stands out most is how quick everything feels. Your aim, your dodge timing, your ultimate placement. For competitive players, FSR3 at 1440p is more than viable. It's fast, stable, and delivers a high frame ceiling without sacrificing too much detail. TSR. Epic's TSR holds up well here. With an average around 80 frames per second, it's fast enough for a smooth experience, and visuals stay mostly clean. You might notice a bit of ghosting when turning rapidly or when particles start stacking up, but it's not disruptive. The clarity in character models and close-up effects is solid, though distant geometry loses sharpness compared to DLSS. TSR is a safe choice, especially if you're on non-NVIDIA hardware or prefer something built directly into Unreal Engine. XESS. Intel's XESS keeps pace, also landing around 70 FPS. It offers solid temporal stability and decent image quality with smooth edges and minimal flicker. While it doesn't quite match DLSS in fine detail, XSS is remarkably close and does a great job with motion. It's a good all-rounder if you're looking for stability and multi-vendor support. Even on NVIDIA hardware, it runs efficiently and keeps the experience fluid from match start to finish. TAAU. TAAU rounds out the lineup with an average of 80 FPS. It's the most traditional looking of the bunch, no advanced reconstruction, but consistent. You may notice minor blurring or less precision on small effects, but frame pacing is solid. In static shots, it looks clean. In fast movement, it holds up reasonably well. If you're not looking for cutting-edge visuals and just want smooth, stable gameplay at high settings, TAAU is still very usable. Let's flip the switch on AMD's frame generation tech and see what kind of real-world boost we get in Marvel Rivals. With FSR3 frame gen enabled, we tested at ultra settings across both 1080p and 1440p. 1080p Ultra plus FG. This is where things get buttery smooth. With frame generation on, we're averaging around 170 FPS at 1080p Ultra, up from the approximately 145 frames per second baseline without FG. That extra headroom gives you extremely fluid animations, which makes fast-paced heroes like Iron Man or Spider-Man feel even snappier. Input latency stays surprisingly tight too. It's not quite native level, but for casual or semi-competitive matches, it's easily playable. You can spam abilities, dash between enemies, and the game keeps pace without noticeable stutter or jitter. Even large-scale team fights hold above 140 frames per second, with solid pacing and no visible frame pacing hiccups. This is easily one of the best use cases for FSR frame gen in a hero shooter. 1440p, Ultra plus FG. Moving to 1440p, frame generation still puts in work. We're averaging around 110 frames per second. Again, a solid jump over the non-FG numbers. You get a smoother experience overall, especially during chaotic ultimates or large-scale map engagements. There's a slight increase in motion softness, but image clarity is preserved thanks to how well FSR3 integrates with the renderer. If you're gaming on a high refresh 1440p display, this boost lets you fully take advantage of it. Team play feels responsive, reload animations are seamless, and tracking fast-moving enemies is much easier when your frame rate doesn't dip. It's not just a luxury, it genuinely makes the game feel better. FSR3 frame generation gives you a big win in smoothness without needing a hardware upgrade. At both 1080p and 1440p Ultra, the RTX 3090 pairs beautifully with it, delivering high frame rates, fluid gameplay, and a top-tier experience in Marvel Rivals. Is the RTX 3090 still enough for Marvel Rivals in 2025? Absolutely. The RTX 3090, even in 2025, remains a formidable GPU capable of handling Marvel Rivals at both 1080p and 1440p resolutions with high settings. If you found this benchmark helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We're aiming for 1,000 subscribers, and your support makes all the difference. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.